So in today's lesson, we're going to go ahead and cover all the main components that you'll see. This will help you identify the different components on the hash board. So when we start going into the different circuits and signal flow, you'll have a better understanding of the hash board itself. So this will help you be a little more efficient, also help you be a little more profitable, as well as faster in your board repair. I'm going to go over all the different components here. So we'll start with the most basic component that we see on the board. So we see a lot of resistors and capacitors and lots of other things. In order to tell what they are, see right here. So all these ones that are kind of a brown color are going to be your capacitors. These ones that have the black coloring on them are going to be your resistor. So this is a electrolytic capacitor. As you can see, it says C for capacitor. These older ones actually are through hole, so it has a backside to it where you actually have to solder from the backside. They started to use, with the newer models, instead of using a through hole, they started to use, as you can see, the pads on this one. So those are some of the bigger capacitors that we work with. We also work with really small ones. So again, these bronze ones or brown ones are capacitors. As you can see here, C for capacitor. And you have R for resistor. So this is the black colored one. Now we want to make sure that we're putting the right ones in the right places. Yeah, so these components here don't have a pole or a direction, so they can be put or placed either way. As far as these other ones that we showed you, these bigger ones, they actually do have a direction. Here's another type of capacitor. It's a titanium capacitor. And this one also has a direction. So as you can see, C is for capacitor. And these are actually used, I like to call them domain capacitors. So they actually separate your ground pads from domain to domain. So if you take your multimeter and you test on both sides, you'll actually get a voltage. And that's what you call core voltage. We also have inductors. As you can see right here, here's a big inductor, L for inductor. And from there you have specialty chips. Let me not forget first. So here we have what's called a diode. D stands for diode. And then we have the specialty chips like U, Q. This one here is in your boost, and this is actually what does the step up. So it steps up the voltage right here. And then all main ICs have a supporting circuit. So they have a bunch of components to support it. So your boost circuit, your step-up IC has all these capacitors, resistors, inductors, diodes. Every single circuit that you work on, even the ASICs themselves, they all have their own supporting components. Yeah, so as you can see here, there's actually a coating over the components. This is what's called a conformal coating. They put it on there to help protect the components from corrosion. So if you're actually going to rework this, you have to use heat to remove it, and then you kind of scrape it away. There's also some other chemicals you can use, but it can be pretty potent. Not really good to inhale. So, yeah. Let's go ahead and describe the different components and what they do. So, again, we have these capacitors here. So C for capacitor. What a capacitor does is it stores energy. It also, more importantly, it actually helps filter the frequency of the signals. I like to think of capacitors like a water tank. So you can fill up that water tank, but you have a slow and steady output. Then from there you have resistors, R for resistor. So resistors, they do exactly what it sounds like. They restrict the current flow. The way that I like to think of resistors is it's like putting a smaller pipe in line, so that way that water, it's a lot harder for it to go through. L is in for inductor. So basically what an inductor does is I like to think of it kind of like a water wheel. So it actually uses a magnetic field and a copper coil. So as the electrons go through the circuit, it keeps that flow going in that direction. And even when you shut off the circuit or turn off the water, that water wheel kind of keeps spinning a little bit. And so in essence, an inductor is kind of like a capacitor and a diode mixed together. Then we can go into the diode. So D is for diode. Basically all that is it just allows the current to flow in one direction. It doesn't let it backfeed. So in essence, if you were to describe it in terms of water, it would be a one-way valve. So it only let the water or current flow in one direction. From there, again, we have all the main ICs, or integrated circuits. So what those do is they have internal circuits inside of them, and they each do different performances. A lot of them are just voltage regulators. So this one's the step-up IC and the boost, and then you have the supporting components to make sure that the voltages and everything is where it needs to be. You have other ICs like the PIC. You have the MOS. Again, what the MOS do is they kind of act like an on-off switch. Same thing with the triodes or transistors. Right here, as you can see, it says Q10. So these are either NPN or PNP. Basically, if you either inject voltage or take voltage away from one of these legs, it lets the voltage go through. And then opening up the MOS chips. Here on the S9 is what's called a buck diode. This steps down the voltage, and as you can see, it has a huge capacitor, resistor, and other component pack that helps support it. So it's very important that you get accustomed to all these different kind of components, what they do. If you don't have a basic understanding of that, it'll be very difficult to even fix these boards. But once you do get an understanding of all these different components, circuits, how they work, you can even work on other things besides hash boards. You can open up like a television, an amp, even your toaster ovens now probably have a bunch of circuits in them. So it's just a really good skill to learn. And that pretty much covers all the main components. Next, we'll be going into the different circuits and the signal flow that goes through the board. So we'll see you there.